welcome to another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing, where we're talking to women who are setting the new standard for modern manufacturing and just killing it. I appreciate all of the women who are in engineering and manufacturing, and I'm super excited to share their stories on this platform. Today, we have Dr. Sirisha. She is the founder and CEO, I believe, of Sahita Technologies. Sirisha, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Meaghan. Looking forward to today's conversation.
Me too. Thank you for joining. So we actually met a couple of times in person, and I just love your energy. I love your passion because you're not only passionate about semiconductors, which I don't think we talk enough about, but you're also passionate about getting other women into the industry, but specifically more in technology roles, which is really, really cool to me because our numbers aren't very high. And everyone knows I'm super competitive, so I really want to beat out the guys. But can you just start off with some background information about yourself? Like, how did you get involved in engineering, and what are you most passionate about?
So I grew up in India in a very sort of academic environment. So technology was always around us. So I did physics in undergrad and masters there and came here for graduate school. So I came to Carnegie Mellon for my masters and eventually finished my PhD when I was actually a stay-at-home mom. So I went back to school a couple of years later. But I basically spent 20 plus years working in technology, mainly in semiconductor companies, in manufacturing, engineering, quality, R&D, working with customers. So it was a great experience. And then I stepped away from corporate about 2 years ago. As I was hosting a podcast for about 3 years in that last phase of it, and it was targeted towards. It was called Women, Career, and Life. So it was targeted towards enabling women to navigate career, corporate life, and think about financial independence. And so, in this new, I guess, avatar and journey, I run a strategy consulting firm that consults on semiconductor, advanced manufacturing solutions, workforce development, and leadership. So I work with various stakeholders, public-private partnerships on advancing this ecosystem.
Awesome. So what is it about the semiconductor industry that you really love? Because again, we don't talk about it. And I know, how long ago was it? I keep lose track, but the government was really involved with like creating policy around getting semiconductors created here. So I'm kind of interested in knowing like the history of semiconductors and their importance in technology today, especially with everything being automated and the push for automation in a lot of our facilities. So can you just kind of give us some insights on what you're passionate about within semiconductors and why it's important for you to be part of that?
Absolutely. So semiconductors are ubiquitous. It's just that we don't think about them. They're in your cell phone. I don't know how many chips are powering this conversation for us. They're in the car that you probably drove down this morning to drop your kid off, airbags, sensors, braking system, like everywhere. If we didn't have semiconductors, I feel like we would go back 3 decades at least. Actually, much more. I mean, they've been around for more than 50 years, but just the advancement in technology, AI, all these chips are semiconductor chips that are essentially made in these factories. Yes, you're right. The US has the CHIPS R&D Act, which passed $50 billion about 3-4 years ago. And there's a lot of money being invested in companies and educational systems and education organizations and EDCs and stuff to drive this ecosystem, because there's the infrastructure and technology and equipment that needs to be built. And these are very expensive, capital intensive investments. Like some of the companies have $10 billion, $30 billion investment to build these factories. And then, of course, they need the workforce upskilled to be able to do these jobs because they're highly skilled jobs. And there's a mix of various sectors, but largely engineers and technicians. Actually, technicians, I think, almost outweigh engineer population 2:1 to keep the factories running, because they run 24/7, essentially 365 days a year for most of it, to build these chips. And oftentimes the chips are built here. The US is trying to get what the second half of essentially you print a wafer. That's how the first part of the wafers are built, the semiconductor chips. And then they have to be diced, packaged. And often that goes overseas, and they're trying to build some of that footprint in the US now as well. So there are some companies that do packaging that are entering the US as we speak to build that infrastructure here as well. And a lot of countries are in the same essential race to build a semiconductor ecosystem. Every country has some of them are starting it afresh. And so there's a global investment in this platform right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and now especially with the dock strikes that are happening here in the United States, like it's just really important that we're able to create some of these components so that we can keep those ecosystems and everyone happy. I don't think everyone quite understands like the seriousness behind some of these strikes and what it can do to really affect engineering and manufacturing. So I think it's super cool that you're in that industry and you talk about it. One of the other things that you're really passionate about is getting more women in these technical spaces. So from your personal experience, what do you think is really holding women back from pursuing some of these more technical career pathways? Because globally, we only represent around 19 to 16, nope, it's like 13 to 16% of engineers globally, which I think is really small. So what do you think is really holding some of us back from pursuing these types of career pathways?
I'll walk you through sort of the phase of life journey, because there's many checkpoints in this. I'll start with the example from middle school. This is an example from the US, right? I grew up in India, so these situations differ a little bit. But I have this picture at home, and I talk about this story. I have two boys, so there's a middle school picture of a math and science state competition. I think there are like about 40 kids, and maybe six are girls. And there itself, I start to see like this sort of flame of the candle, like the problem statement already arising. So there are kids sometimes exiting as early as elementary, middle school from math and science. And oftentimes, the way the US education system is structured, there's a lot of flexibility, but also there's a lot of prerequisites. There's so much choice. There's AP, IB, just normal dual credit. And you have to almost take these early math classes to take the more advanced classes. So if someone is not able to guide you through that and tell you that it's not as complicated and give you confidence, you kind of self-doubt and self-restrict yourself out of it. Or you haven't had someone, show you that that's an opportunity or a pathway, right? You're often influenced by your peer group, what you know, and the communities around you. So when you talk about underrepresented communities, if they don't have someone from STEM, it's not something that they think of as, it's potentially that they don't think of it as accessible. So how do
Yeah.
you spark that flame right there? And then when you get to high school and college, there's this whole, college experience. And then you enter the workforce, you need mentorship, you need career guidance, and we don't often know where to go look for it. When I came here for graduate school, my university had this mentoring program with someone from industry, and I had a lady who's actually a NASA scientist building the Hubble telescope, which was like, oh, this is so cool. So
Yeah.
considering that was something that I liked as a middle school student, so she was able to provide guidance, and my questions to her were never technical. It was really about navigating work-life balance. How, as when I have a partner who also has a grad degree, how do we find jobs together? How do we manage life? And from what I recollect, she had young children then. So you need sometimes technical guidance, but you need personal guidance, because these are not questions I will go ask my boss at work. Like, where do I have a
Yeah.
safe space to have a conversation, right? And that becomes a challenge. And as you're growing, I briefly mentioned I was a stay-at-home mom for some time, so I decided to step away from the workforce. It might be someone might think about it, but whether you choose to do it as a parent, a caregiver, or whatever reasons, I just want to remind people that it is never a bad idea. If you choose to do it, don't worry too much about coming back into the workplace, because those are things that hold us back. So we might decide to hold back when we have kids, and those are personal decisions. Completely get them, but don't forget to challenge the system, because you will get support. There have been incredibly supportive managers I've had. I've seen them support other people, but you have to kind of ask, and sometimes you may find the support and sometimes you may not. Then it might be a time for you to make a decision whether to move, whether to stay, whatever you decide. But I would
Yeah.
say be more vocal, and do it in the way that makes you feel comfortable. I think that is something we need to do. Obviously, there needs to be childcare resources. There's a lot of government discussion around this. I'm going to stay out of the politics of it, but it would help to have support. and understand with people coming back to work, remote work, that complicates life because oftentimes women disproportionately have home care and other burdens on them. And the other thing is, when you're thinking about growing in corporate ladders, this is something that I didn't realize till a friend kind of prodded me and said, "Why do you keep moving laterally? Why are you not looking at management?" That I hadn't even considered it. It always seemed incredibly intimidating for me because I felt like they knew more, the people who were managers, and I'm like,
Mm.
how do I manage people? So it was kind of a scary proposition till I thought about it. I went to my boss and he's like, yes, you don't have these skills, but these are steps you can take to get them. So, he came with kind of a strategy. The onus was on me, but he was willing to support me and kind of let me figure it out, but had
Yeah.
my back. And you need people like that. So sponsors become so important, and we don't know where they are. There's mentors, there's sponsors, there's advocates. There are like different tiers of people who support us. Some we may know, some we may not, some we may find, some may come to us. And so I would tell women, because research shows that men tend to apply for jobs even if they don't have all six qualifications for it.
Yeah.
They might have one or two, but women always think we need to have everything figured out before we apply, but we don't. I would just say, even if you don't have anything in the job qualification, apply for the job, or at least go have a conversation with that manager, because you will find out what they're looking for and you will learn something to see if that job is right for you. And I've done a lot of those over time. And
Yeah.
that's the only way you'll open the door for yourself. You have nothing to lose at that point. You're going to gain
Yeah.
something from that conversation or that experience.
Yeah, I agree with that. I didn't learn until recently that you can ask people to be your mentor. I just always thought that they found you and they were like, "Hey, I want to take you under your wing." So I didn't really get into having like mentors that I knew I needed my certain skill sets of mine to improve on. Um, I've had mentors before that, but the last two, I literally asked them, "Hey, you have this skill set that I want. Can you mentor me? And can we have these conversations?" And they were like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I think it helps if you can have that confidence to ask people for help too. I do want to shout out to people. Andrew said not high enough for sure. I don't know what he was talking about there. Maybe the conversation around semiconductors. And then Hank is here with junior board of directors, I hope. Hi, Hank. Thank you for joining us. And then Sai, hello. So excited to learn. And she said, absolutely. I was like that, but trying to change now. So I'm seeing more women get a little bit more confident. And one of the other things you said is you left the corporate world and now you have Sahita Technologies. So what was that turning point for you where you made that decision to say, okay, I'm done with corporate world. Now I'm going to, he said, not enough women in manufacturing. Got it. Thanks, Andrew. What was that turning point for you where you left corporate world to start Sahita?
So it came for a couple of reasons. I'd gone back to work and I was
Mm-hmm.
podcasting at the same time, and so time became an incredible constraint. And I was at sort of this crossroads on where my journey was going to take me next, and how much time I would have to invest in a new role. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I really liked working for my company, and the technology and the people and everything around it. But it was more a personal decision. It literally came on to, I had so much going on. My kids were in this transition of school and college, and I realized I was dropping some balls in the air. And I decided I actually kind of transitioned through a leave, and then essentially took some few months to think about what I wanted to do, or if I wanted to transition back, if I wanted to work, how would that look? And realized that if I wanted to pursue anything that I was interested in, I would have to like take a break and think about it and actually work on it, because time kind of moves. It's the one thing that
Yeah.
none of us have a control over. It is going to happen no matter what. And I wouldn't be able to invest in my own ideas and my own thoughts and whatever I wanted to work on if I didn't spend it. And I was able to spend time with my kids, one of them before he left for college, one is getting ready to leave in not the near future, and just hang out once in a while. They're
Yeah.
teenagers, so they are busy as well, so it's like even those little things were important. So it came about from time as a constraint. But the other thing I tell people is, it is a risk decision, right? So I'm hedging my risk to do this. And sort of, this is my third exit from corporate. I got laid off first, then I was a stay-at-home mom, so this is sort of a second intentional break that I took. And I always tell people, and since we're talking about, at least in the circles I move in, many of the women also, how do you drive financial independence? How do you manage your money? How do you look at
Yeah.
those numbers? Becomes very critical. It's something that we need to own and think about and look at it. And oftentimes we find that, I'm talking about people, probably from certain circles of privilege as well, is you may not need as much as you think we do. So just looking at the numbers, I think, helps you make a decision. I believe finances are such a critical part of de-risking ourselves and just feeling
Yeah.
more comfortable with it, that we need to look at that as well.
So how comfortable were you with your, because I get this a lot from women, like and me personally, I'm horrible with my, like, with finances. I have to do a better job at like budgeting stuff, and that's something that I'm continuously working on year to year, where I actually am more purposeful, sitting down, going over what's coming in, what's going out, and then that's how I plan my following year, where before I didn't worry about it that much. But when you're a business owner, you really have to be mindful of things. So I mean, was financial independence something that you had before you started your own business, or was it something that you needed to learn through this journey? And like, what was your first step in getting that independence, and what resources were you using?
So there's two parts of it. From a personal standpoint, I've been kind of on the journey for, I'd say, a decade and more, from slowly starting that stay-at-home mom transition, right? Because even that's a financial decision when you're stepping away from a two
Mm-hmm.
to a one person working. So it's something I had to learn. I actually learned when I got laid off, and I gave it to this bank or investment firm that I was working with, and they made these investments, and I realized they were all quite terrible. That there was so much fees and everything, that I had to, like, get burnt a few times to figure it out. But mine is very simple. Pretty much everything is automated. I don't I run my accounts every so often and I look at it, but I try to be as hands off, and that's just me. And I realized too much meddling is not my style, and it won't work for me. It's just too much to manage, and I like knowing it, but I don't want to think about it day in and day out. So you have to find that happy medium for yourself. And I think it intimidates a lot of us, but there's index funds, which seems to be what most of the industry suggests, which makes it incredibly simple. You just diversify your portfolio and you figure out what the right mix is. You can get a
Mm-hmm.
fiduciary financial advisor if that's something you want to invest in. So there are all these softwares now that make it so simple. I mean, not to plug, but I actually ended up writing a book called 12 Steps to Financial Independence because I realized how complicated it is. So it's just like stories. It's like 80 pages or something, or even less than that. And it has like checklists at the end of each page because it talks about wills, trusts, everything. Like, checklist to think about what to do. And even for me, I have to kind of pick it up and revise some of the things because it's never a static process, right? It's a continuous
Yeah.
journey. And then when you
Well,
kind of,
I have a new book that I need to purchase.
yeah, it's an easy read. I made it simple because I like practical ideas of what can I do. I just need
Yeah.
to like think about it. And so it's on Amazon if you want to take a look. And so I now switching to business is a little bit of a different ball game. So it's the first year was kind of challenging managing the finances because having exited corporate, you don't think the faucet is fully shut off, and it took me some time to realize the faucet is closed, so you kind of have to think about what this looks like. And this year I have a lot of travel. Most of the time I think when people see me or friends see me, they're like, you're out and about. But I
Mhm.
see it as an investment in my business because I am meeting people I've either connected online or making new connections. Like, I met you when you were visiting locally. Sometimes
Mhm.
I travel. I go to conferences. I speak at them, connect with different people. So because there is no way for me to predict what that engagement would look like. It's not that I'm just going to pitch my business. That's not usually what I'm going there for. It's to share ideas, learn from someone. And from there,
Yeah.
sort of it transforms into a different conversation. We find some common threads with some people reach out when they see you. And yes, this year's budgeting will be a bit tight and crazy. I have at least a few more trips this month, and then it's getting better. But I've it's been a very conscious decision because I had expenses when I hosted a podcast as well, and so kind of thinking about it very consciously is something to manage and just bucket them as business expenses. Everything's a business account, obviously, and it's all managed through that, so it doesn't
Mhm.
cross the personal space.
So let's take a deeper dive into Sahita Technologies. I know you kind of provided a brief overview at the beginning of our conversation, but what are some of the headaches or issues that you're really helping companies solve with your company?
So some of the problems are around workforce strategy. Like as I
Okay.
said, the semi industry needs a lot of talent. So it's around figuring out the kind of programming, workforce strategies, digital strategies. How do we engage? That is one part of it. Then there's also technical consulting. I do like semiconductor consulting for people who might be running operations and looking at efficiency. It doesn't have to be just semiconductor, it's any manufacturing, right? Mid-sized business, small-sized business. You're looking at
Okay.
operational efficiency, you're looking at quality. I spend a lot of like almost a decade in quality. So it's like, how do you integrate quality into operations to make it that you have great products and happy customers? Because, and how do you engage with customers? Because that's something that, we had to transform those relationships. And as well as looking at there are, like I said, the semi industry is growing, so there's a lot of investment in different parts of the globe. So as people are looking at evaluating their programs, how to build either technical solutions and holistically look at the whole ecosystem, or looking at their workforce strategies, there are those that I do. And I do,
Mm-hmm.
I have like a couple of verticals. So the other part of the vertical I do is also leadership talks and workshops with different companies. I've done talks at like SWE, their leadership institute, at Toyota and things. So a lot of them is with public-private consortiums, with companies, with different sort of government intersectional agencies. So it's sort of a transformation at the universities and corporates and medium-sized businesses. So there's a lot of work going on along the way.
Mm-hmm. What do you see are some of the major gaps then between workforce and manufacturing? Because we see it all the time, right, in our industry where people are like, we don't have enough talent. So where are they? I feel like because of all the conversations that I've had, it's kind of on us to really educate the general public. Because right now, you say manufacturing, and depending on where they are, they're going to think something different of it or envision something different. So where do you think the gaps are in really getting people excited about this sector and wanting to come join it as a career?
You are so right. There is so little visibility on what we do. And manufacturing is a huge, big word. I didn't realize till I actually went to a smart manufacturing conference, as well as how big, beverages, paper products, food, like everything is manufactured in the world. The
Mm-hmm.
shuttles that are behind you, the table that's next to you, the chair you're sitting on, like everything is
Mm-hmm.
a manufactured project. So, and also some of the conversations I've had, especially in the Northeast, what the university, you know, educators are saying is sometimes manufacturing is considered a dirty word because of traditional mills and safety and stuff. But the world has changed. There's so much automation. In a way, is a good thing because it protects you, it keeps you healthy, it keeps you safe. And so there's technology that can interest you. You can still do tech and still work with your hands. I think that's the part that we miss. Not everyone, if you're looking at STEM, not everyone needs to code, not everyone needs to do those things. We need people who work on robots. Maybe you're on a farm, maybe you like drag racing and you like to fix your car. Manufacturing would be a great place for you because there are so
Mm-hmm.
many skills that transfer, and the environment would be more maybe something that you would enjoy. So there is a huge onus on all of us to talk about what we do. I mean, frankly, before COVID, no one knew what semiconductors were either. Only because the supply chain crisis happened and you couldn't get a laptop or you couldn't buy a car off a lot,
Yeah.
that people even realized, oh, there is this thing I need to think about. Because when we talked about chips, this is not what people think about.
Yeah.
So there
Well,
is all of that needs to be done. We
I
need.
remember a lot of people that I worked with, they couldn't complete a project because they needed a specific chip and they just couldn't get access to it, and it really slowed things down. And that's when everybody started talking about reshoring and making things where you live, because if things shut down, your production's going to shut down, and then you're kind of just sitting there figuring out, okay, how else can I make my machines run or go, because we don't have this chip and our machine is down. So again though, like I'm going to bring up the doc strikes right now,
Mhm.
because I've seen a lot of conversations on LinkedIn where people are getting a little frustrated with the signs that are, against automation and against robotics. But again, it's that lack of education. We're not doing a very good job explaining the benefits of automation and some of these technologies. So, do you have anything within your like discussions or processes or strategies that you're in your conversations with like leadership around like how we can make that connection with the general public? Like, do you focus on that at all?
Yeah, actually, I do. There's a couple of different things. The thread that the question you ask, right? It's a great question because one is I talk about the impact of digital media. Every if you talk about the generation that's in school and college, they're on a screen. You need to reach them on a screen to talk about it. You're not going to get them. Maybe in the school systems too. When you talk about the dock worker strike, this it's a twofold thing, right? It's many folds actually. One is when COVID happened, there's a lot of raw material for these manufacturing plants that come from overseas, chemicals, gases, things like that we don't think about. So the dockside strike impacts that raw material supply, which also puts manufacturing on halt. So the people are
Mm-hmm.
trying to always figure out how to do this. Also, I mean, the dockside workers are in, I'm sure, different generations, different skill sets. So using them, the world is changing. Automation is happening in Gen AI. Everything is going to happen. It's a little bit hard to stop the runaway train. It's there out there, right? But how do we make sure we're upskilling people? And
Yeah.
I mean, part of the thing is it's fear, right? And it's fair to have that fear. We all are worried about how do we provide for our families, how do we send our kids to school, they get a degree, how do they find jobs. That's actually something a friend and I are working on, bridging that skills gap and seeing how to build a future workforce. So that's a problem statement we're actually working on, how to figure that, how to bridge that gap, because when there's so much unknown is what drives us to be worried, scared, and fear. It's like a change management, if we were to break it down. But so we need
Mm-hmm.
to think about how to reskill people, how to upskill people, how to have those conversations, because if we always come at the end and then try to work backwards, but we need to start looking future forward and saying how do we future proof everything, because okay,
Yeah.
it's happening, but how do we make it safe and viable? And people are at different sectors. We may be talking about students and manufacturing, but there are people who work 10, 15 years or 20 years. And when I have conversations with friends in other industries, they don't know that there's a talent shortage. Maybe the skills don't immediately transfer to the industry, but they can do things to transfer it to this industry. So how do you
Right.
use all of that knowledge? And so it needs to be a very ongoing discussion. I think workforce development is understood as a problem statement. We know it's important and we invest time and resources into it, but I feel like sometimes we have to understand that the problem is sometimes bigger than we think it is. And we
Yeah.
also have to be incredibly cognizant that yes, educational institutions need money to build programs, but they are not the only candidates for it. You need marketing, media, lots of other intangibles, what in some ways we consider fluff if you're from tech, but they are so important that if you want to reach a target population, you are going to have to try many, many ways to reach them. Like the
Yeah.
one way, you're almost targeting the people who are already in the system going down that path. They're going to go
Mm-hmm.
there down that path no matter what. You're trying to segue them a little bit, but you're not trying to generate new streams of people to this industry. Then you're going to have to do different things. I mean, let's talk about the roadshow that happens, right?
Yeah.
That you guys did at ITMS and stuff. So it's like all of these things. How do you generate excitement for people to want to do it?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the thing, right? You have to go to those places where those workers are and have a conversation with them, because I think one of the one of the assumptions I'm making from these posts on LinkedIn is, some people think, oh, well, they just need to upskill. Well, where are they going to know to go to
Mm-hmm.
upskill if they don't know that that's an option? And it's really easy for us who are in the sector and in the middle of everything to like have these resources and know about the other resources. But if you, like you mentioned, if you worked at some place for 15, 20 years, you're kind of shut off from everything else because that's all you know. And until someone comes and brings attention to that specific thing, you're only going to know what you know and you're not going to know what you don't know, kind of thing. So I think we definitely need to go to these places and have more conversations around. One woman that I come up with, her name is Kathy, and she's in Eastern Kentucky, and that was a huge coal mine place, and she knew that coal mine wasn't going to be around forever. So what she partnered up with the Gene Haas Foundation, and she made this technology hub there in Eastern Kentucky, and she invited all of the coal miners to come and learn about CNC machining and robotics, and now I think they added additive manufacturing. So she was able to see that there were some similarities between their coal mining skills and some of the stuff that they can do with CNC machining. So she herself opened that opportunity. So we need leaders like that in every community, and it's a bigger problem than like you mentioned, that we realize, and we got to have these conversations more often. I do want to point out some comments. Hank said, I think I need to get into schools at the elementary level to show the kids how manufacturing is cool, show them what we do and how they can do it as well, give them hands-on experience. 100% yes. We all know Drew Crow. He does an amazing job of really advocating for underrepresented groups, and even, people who have made bad choices and mistakes and ended up in jail. He's a huge advocate for just and impacted individuals. And then Sai wanted to ask you, how do you think internationals can get into manufacturing that are not only engineers or technical roles, maybe marketing or other basic roles, which are equally important in the company? So do you want to kind of touch on
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. I want to take like three questions or something you said about exposure. I'll just use my own example. When I exited corporate, I realized 80-90% of my LinkedIn was my company, because you're so heads down at work that you don't really
Yeah.
have time to invest. So it's been for me like building up, building and expanding my network. So to your point, people don't know, what's out there because they don't have the bandwidth. Hank's absolutely right. We all need to go speak to schools, get kids excited about it. They want to know what's out there. They themselves are also worried, right? I was just having a chat with an educator not too long ago, and we were talking about mental health and everything. And kids are sometimes entering this place of uncertainty, and it bothers them, and they need to know what opportunities are there. And going back to Sai's question, yes, I was talking about technology and technicians and engineers, but all these institutions do not work with people who are not from tech. You need HR, you need I mean IT is still tech, but you need other units, HR, marketing, sales, everything else
Finances. Yeah.
that needs to keep the organization. Finance, I mean, I say this jokingly, but also it's true. No company would run if finance didn't run it. No matter how cool the technology is, if the money isn't there, the money is to be made, nothing lasts forever. So
Yeah.
money, even for a non-profit, if they're not generating funds, they cannot work, right? There has to be a financial management. So there are a lot of non-technical roles that are just as important to keep it very, very critical, because you need to be able to sell your product. I think someone put sales. So
Yeah.
all of those become very important. And you as a technologist, going back to our media and marketing idea, can be so caught into the idea that technology is a cure all for everything when it's not. You need other perspectives, other people to bring other ideas and say, hey, we need to be thinking like this, we need to be doing this. And just going back to when products are designed, right? You find a lot of articles on LinkedIn, especially now, and there is this I think the book is called Invisible Women. I think that's the top book, by this author, about how either research or products are often created, because historically these technical fields have had men, so products are created with, I mean, think about just the aircraft. I know it's a height thing, but putting your bag in the top,
Yeah.
lifting it and putting it is a chore every time. You can't ask someone for help, and it's very high. If you're not tall enough, you can't reach it. I also heard that Alexa, when it first came out, didn't recognize certain voices because it wasn't tuned for women. So there are these things that we don't think about. I mean, like they talk about crash dummies, right? There are male crash dummies, so it's not designed for women bodies and height and weight. So they're though you have less accidents, the injuries received are actually more. So
Mm-hmm.
you need, similarly, though we are talking about technology, similarly you need diverse perspectives of people, skills, life experiences, roles to design a product. A product cannot be just designed by technologists. You need designers, marketing people, everyone to come and think about what does this need to look like? Who is our customer? Why are we building this? Does someone want it? What is the advantage of it? So absolutely, you need all of these other roles to come together.
Yeah, and again, and I say this all the time, we have to do a lot better being the voices of the sector and actually like talking to members of our community. And I think with this being manufacturing month and manufacturing days around the corner, like companies really need to start putting that in their strategy. Like, let's have a community day where we're inviting the community to come in and check out what we're actually building, what we're making, what problems we're solving. Right now in my hometown, they're actually having a construction day this week, and they're bringing all of the construction companies together so that kids can look at the trucks and learn about like how they're helping maintain the strength of the community, because without construction our roads would be crap, like we wouldn't have buildings. They bring in the fire trucks so that they can learn about what the fire trucks are important for. They bring the big cranes out, so it's just educating. I learned a lot last year from it. I was probably having more fun than my kids were because I just thought it was super cool to be around that. Hank said we just did first aid training, and for the first time, the trainer had female CPR mannequins. He talked about how this made many people uncomfortable. The female mannequin made people uncomfortable. Why? Because is it the chest area? Was that making them uncomfortable? That's ridiculous. We see a lot of effort in marketing to get kids into these industry. Why is there no push to poach workers from other industries? We can't wait 15 years for these roles to be filled. I've actually, and I don't know who that is, so if you want to drop your name in the comments, let me know. LinkedIn doesn't like your settings. That's a good question. Like, do you think we're doing enough poaching from other industries?
So actually, I was at a conference recently where there was actually a university. It was Carnegie Mellon, which had university research on where some of this construction is going on and how they're looking at poaching is not necessarily the best word, but
Probably not.
essentially taking people from other industries to skill them. But you have to realize it's a finite problem. You take them out from healthcare or technicians from there, somebody has to backfill that space. So there's always going to be like a hole somewhere that needs to be plugged. And we can't wait 15 years. I strongly believe veterans are an amazing workforce. I know they move into tech, but they need to be tapped into more and more because they have the skill set, the mindset. They my first job, I worked mostly with vets, and they're incredible to work with. Very smart. They understand the technology. I mean, they're working on technology way more advanced than probably what we're working in corporate sometimes, because they're working on these um, you know military machines, which are obviously designed for next generation. So all of that, we need to like think about how to bring veterans, in some ways not just the traditional pathways to do, poach them from a different industry, whatever it is. People, when you're already a working, transitioning to another job is kind of a hard thing because you have families, caregiving, finances, all of this. So you need to make that transition as much as possible something that works for them. A huge break
Mhm.
is going to be challenging for some people. So I wish there was a single like silver bullet to fix it, but there is nothing that stops you from getting them from another industry. And that's where competition happens, right? When the
Mhm.
salaries go up, when people realize that they have competition, they have to pay for getting people
Yeah.
certain skill set. And that's when usually there's a jump, either when you move or when the companies realize, oh, I'm in a tight market and I need workers. And that's when it moves.
Um, I recently had a conversation. I was at a CAD CAM software conference, and I recently had a conversation about the opportunities that that space is actually offering anybody who might be paraplegic or wheelchair bound. Um, because we have advanced technologies where people can communicate via computer voice, and move things just with the movement of their eyes, like that technology is getting better. There's opportunity for designers in that space who might not be able to move their arms and legs, which I thought was fascinating. Like that, just think of the different types of designs we could come to fruition if we could get more of that group involved with engineering and manufacturing, and just the sense of purpose too that we're giving them, because there's a lot of depression in that group that, because they can't really move a lot, but even like things that they need to survive would become a lot better too if they were given the chance to design it themselves, because they know from their own personal experience. So I think it's just a really cool time to be in this sector, but again, we have to like be better advocates for it. So what are some of the big questions that you get from leadership then, because you work with a lot of leaders in different areas? Like what questions do they come with you
So
come to you for?
yeah, so when you talk about like workforce and stuff, right? A couple of things from colleges is how do we attract people into traditional engineering? That's something that they're also struggling with. They tend to go to CS,
Mhm.
ECE. Traditional engineering is sometimes in some places having a bit of a hard time. Maybe not all places, because depending on where the students see, they see the FANG companies, right? So how do you do that? How do you get experiential learning? Because how do I become gainfully employed when I graduate? There is no guarantee, right? Just because I went to college anymore. So there is that part as well. I see that from students. I'm a parent myself. I've recruited. How do you get them upskilled so they're easily deployable? Those are sort of the education questions around this. And from a technical standpoint, it's operations. We when you're in a certain industry, like if I go to my industry, the semi industry is fairly technologically advanced. Not just the technology we build, but the automation and stuff we have. And obviously, each company has a different part of that advancement. Some are much more automated, some are less. And mid-sized business might have other financial constraints. So there's a lot of other play things that come into effect. And so everyone is in a different step of the journey, and you have to kind of meet them where they are. And how do you leapfrog some of it? How do you like take away some of the pain you've already gone through and realize it's not important? You don't have to do this stuff, but you can go here. I think
Mhm.
that becomes very important when they're finding technical solutions, because that's part of what I do. Is because I've worked in different factories, manual, automated, and worked through a lot of different issues like that. So they're all in different parts of their journey. How do you leapfrog some of that? How do you realize what is not critical anymore? You don't have to go through the whole learning process. I'll use this example. In India, when I grew up, we had the dial-up phones, right? We probably many of us grew up with it. It would take a long time to get a landline, but India kind of leapfrogged this landline by adopting mobile phones. Like everyone, I mean, the digital technology is much farther advanced than what you find here. Banking, everything, because they have a digital tech platform that the government in the last few years. So they first leapfrogged the mobile thing. They got all these towers and all of this mobile. So
Mhm.
people started to go away from the landline. Like even the fruit vendor on the street has mobile phones, and they have a digital tech platform that the government's helped establish, that every transaction is done digitally. I think if you carry money, probably they know you're not from there, I suspect, because nobody's carrying money. Everything is a digital wallet. So there are ways to leapfrog that you don't have to go through the pain process of learning someone else from someone else's mistakes, right? You can just do that. So I think even in automation and stuff, just because technology exists, automation exists, industry 4.0 exists, doesn't mean you need it. Doesn't mean it's going to solve your problem. For it's
Great.
first more important for you to figure out what your problem is, where do you want to go in the future, and then use the right pieces to get there. I think sometimes we can be enamored by the technology, or oftentimes what I see is we are never quite sure of what our end goal is. Like I always ask people, what is your end vision? It can be a grand vision, doesn't matter. Let's walk backwards, because we always piecemeal a problem. I'll put this piece, I'll put this piece, then it won't integrate with this piece, then I've spent money, bought another piece. They all don't integrate. It's like this jigsaw puzzle that doesn't ever quite fit right. So if you start with the big, I know what this picture looks like. I may not want that picture in the end, but at least I know I have a vision. Then I can kind of build it up to there. And that is so important, because Gen AI, I'm sure people are not wanting to be left out, but why do you need this technology? What is value does it provide for you? Because the one thing we don't have a much conversation is in manufacturing, when you have all these software and technology solutions, it's very quite hard to integrate them. It's not so simple. There's
Hmm.
always a dream and a vision, and sometimes it executes successfully and sometimes it doesn't. So it never quite fully solves the problem you started with. But if you only focused on one thing to solve, and if that was the right problem, then you could put the resources to solve that one problem and then move to the next one. So that's how I would caution people to like think about how they're solving the manufacturing, whether you're optimizing operations or you have a quality issue, or maybe it's a customer thing where it's more about having a conversation with the customer and not just investing. Use the technology to fix it, but you first need to understand what is the pain point.
Yeah. So what's ahead for you, Sirisha? Like, what are you working on currently? What are you excited most about in the future?
I'm very much at this crossroads with this sort of getting traction on what I'm working on. So some of it is technology solutions, like we're talking about addressing pain points with
Hmm.
technology or workforce. I'm working on digital media assets, like thinking about how to use, essentially ask the questions you're asking. How do you look at manufacturing? And my business colleague and I are working on really how to get students ready and more employable for the future work, because that is something that we are both incredibly passionate about. And we've been talking about it. We actually went for a workshop. We conducted a workshop at a joint conference between Penn State and Global Silicon Ventures on understanding what the pain points are to solve this problem. Because
Hmm.
just because I graduate school or college doesn't mean I know what I'm doing or how to become employable. So how do I figure that out and
Yeah.
navigate that space? So there's a part of the technical stuff that I do, and definitely there's a sort of workforce component of work. And when people ask me to pick one, I my answer usually is I'm able to do both. I enjoy doing both, and I'm able to manage it. And one of the reasons for exiting any corporate structure for me was the fact that I you can work multitudes rather than a singular
Yeah.
issue. So that's part of the intersection of it that I like. So I don't know what actually, I mean, I have some idea of what next year will look like, but only when the rubber hits the road, I don't know what next year will look like at this time.
Yeah. That's
So
cool.
I'm excited.
Well, um, I really want to thank you for coming on to Mavens and talking with us. I think you're a brilliant human being, and I love listening to you talk. So I know that you've been picking up a lot of keynote opportunities and speaking opportunities. Is there anything in the future that people can register for or sign up at that you're speaking at and maybe connect with you in person?
I think that the three things. So if they're there, I'm at the Empowering, Women Conference in New Orleans that's coming up in a few weeks. That I know you're going to be, Megan. You're going to be
Mm.
emceeing the event. I'm looking forward to the runway part as well. um, the second thing is I'm going to be in the semi space. I'm attending a conference at A&M in the third week of October, and the government office, the NatCast, is actually having um, a government a microelectronic commons conference in the last week of October. So I'll be going there because I meet a lot of people online. So I'm really excited about meeting them in person and actually
Yeah.
having a face-to-face conversation with them. And, kind of, in some ways, when you meet in person, you never know what the conversation drives and where it goes. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah. So I like to give all of my guests one opportunity to ask their own question to our audience. So if you had one ask for our audience, what would that be?
I would ask, I guess it's a request. I would say have a conversation about what you do, whether it's technical, career, finance, mistakes you made, how you failed, with the people around you. I talk to my kids about flunking classes, which I did quite a few. No one believes it, but I did flunk a lot of classes along the way, even during my grad program. But I think it's very important because we are so living in this perfectionist world that we are thinking that it needs to be all perfect and we need to have it figured out, and we have to realize that we don't know. I mean, if you had asked me 5 years ago if I would be doing what I'm doing now, I'd have probably said no way. But life is a journey, and it's not a sprint. You'll figure it out. And so my request is have those conversations as much as you can, and also talk about money, because I did a TEDx talk on talking to kids about money, and I think that's just as important to give them empowerment And I know I'm talking about young people, but this could be people who are working professionally for 15 years, but the same problem statement can exist in different ages. It could be when you retire and you've never managed your money too. But all of these
Yeah.
requests, just have conversations with a lot of people to let them know that they're not the only ones facing whatever they are doing.
Yeah. Do you have a link that you can send me to that TEDx talk?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Send that to me. I'm going to send it to my daughter too, because she's horrible.
Yeah. So this one was actually a talk. I'm actually, give me a second. I'm going to drop it in the chat as well. Because it is a talk that anyone can have with anyone they know. It's meant for parents. I don't know how to drop it in the chat. Join the chat.
The private chat or the?
Actually, I'll drop it in the private chat so that way you can post it.
Yeah, and then I'll put it in the.
Yeah, because it is meant for parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, caregivers, anyone to talk to kids. I just do it through storytelling, like what does research show? How do you teach them taxes? And it's not done, right? I still have that conversation with my own kids. But
yeah, that's super helpful though. I'm going to watch that. So thank you for sharing that. Well, Dr. Sirisha, if anybody has any further questions with you or wants to connect with you in person, what's the quickest way to contact you or get in touch with you?
Please connect with me on LinkedIn. That is the best way. Whether you want to have a conversation about this, engage in a partnership, collaborate, looking for consulting, whichever. LinkedIn is the first way. You can also email to my company, sirisha@sahitatechnologies.com. But I check LinkedIn too. So if you don't hear back, probably it will take me a bit of time. But yes.
Awesome.
And
well,
definitely.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time you took out of your day to come talk on Mavens of Manufacturing. Anyone tuning in, please reach out to her, connect with her. She is an amazing human being. You will definitely learn something from her. I just love talking to you. I think you're amazing. So I'm super excited to see you in October at the Empowering Women in Industry event. And I'm super excited to look at that TEDx. But I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you again soon. So take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. And I just want to say, Meaghan, you do a fantastic job of, spreading the message and just being a strong advocate. So thank you for doing that as well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, again, I hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.
This episode of Mavens of Manufacturing has been sponsored by Z Ink Solutions. Z Ink Solutions. This isn't your grandmother's copywriting service. We provide copywriting and copy editing services that provide impactful text and memorable storytelling for a variety of brands and industries. Contact us today at zinkSolutions.com. That's z-inksolutions.com.